Hello and welcome back to the home renovation series. Behind me is our dining room. This room used to be blue and it's kind of been a dumping ground for all the things that we don't know where to put yet that need to be on the main level of our house. And we've been slowly trying to reclaim this space as an actual dining room. So I spent some time earlier this week prepping and priming and painting this space. Take that. As we've been working through this house, I have learned a lot of things about prepping spaces for paint and removing trim. One of them being you definitely want to score along the edges of trim so that when you pull off the trim, it doesn't pull off big pieces of the paint. Because this paint is prone to peeling because there's several layers of paint. Here's a spot where I did not do that, and as you can see I have a huge spot where the paint peeled and I had to patch this area. But other than that, this room was actually not that bad to prep for painting. A lot of the other rooms in this house had big holes and like a lot of holes in the walls. This room was not too bad. I also use these little nippers to pull out nails. This has been one of my most used tools because there are a lot of nails that don't come out when you pull off the trim. So it's nice to have these because sometimes the claws of a hammer will not pull out those nails. The heads are too small in those finishing nails. And one of my viewers had, or maybe it was a couple of viewers. Anyway, some of you guys had mentioned that wet sanding was a great way to sand drywall mud and also the spackle for filling the holes. And I tried that this time and it actually worked really well, and it kind of saved me the grief of dealing with all the dust. And once I had all of the holes patched and sanded down, I just wiped down the walls really well with a tack cloth. It's just a cheesecloth-like piece of fabric that is coated in some kind of wax that is really tacky, and it really does a great job of cleaning dust and grime and fine dust off of things. So I love these things. And you'll see here, this thing was pretty nasty when I finished. This was the last room on the main level of our house that needed to be painted. And having this room a different color than our kitchen and also having half the trim removed, it's just made it feel so unfinished. And so having it painted now is already feeling like a step in the right direction. And we've reached that point in the renovation that most of the things that we're doing make the house feel a little bit better. Whereas before we were tearing a lot of things down and it was kind of it gets worse before it gets better phase of the construction. But now things are really starting to feel like they're coming along. I chose the color Cotton Knit by Behr for most of the rooms on the main level just to start. I may eventually paint things another color, but this has been a great color to kind of brighten up and warm up the space a little bit. It has a little bit of warmth to it, and I've really been happy with this color. So this room already feels like a different room, but as you can see, we don't have any trim on the windows. The same thing for the rest of the house. So this week we're working on trim. We are replacing all of the trim in the house, and the original trim in the house was kind of that really small, like 2 1/4 inch trim on all of the doors and windows, and then the base trim was also, I think, that size, maybe a little bit taller. I wanted to go with something a little bit chunkier and a little bit more Craftsman inspired. And I did a test run on our window in the kitchen a few weeks ago and kind of tested out exactly how I wanted to configure the trim. So I really like how that turned out. I'm gonna be doing that for all of the doors and windows in this house. So I'm gonna be doing things a little bit differently in the sewing room. And if you watched my last video here on the channel, you'll know that I recently did a whole makeover on this space, and I have already installed the trim on the windows in this room. And that brings me to the sponsor of today's video, FlexiSpot. So a big thank you to FlexiSpot, who I have worked with multiple times and for good reason. They have great products that I have actually used and thoroughly enjoyed. I was first introduced to FlexiSpot's products when they sent me the E7 Pro standing height desk, which can be programmed to automatically adjust to multiple heights with the touch of a button. I have loved using this desk in my sewing space, and it serves multiple functions here as both my sewing table and as an extension of my cutting table when I need to cut large pieces of fabric. And FlexiSpot recently sent me the L3 Essential Office Chair to complete my sewing space. This chair is so nice, so comfy. It is so well made, putting my previous sewing chair to shame. It glides effortlessly and easily across the floor. It's really quiet. The L3 chair is adjustable with an ergonomic design that supports the hips and back, which is perfect for when you're sitting and sewing for a long time or sitting and doing any kind of office work for a long time, making it both comfortable and functional. I was especially drawn to the vintage style of this chair with its tufted cushions and leather look because I not only wanted something something that was, you know, very comfortable and functional in the space. I wanted something that looked nice and fit the vibe of the space. Oh, this is so comfy. It's really extra wide too, which is nice because I feel like sometimes these chairs can feel too narrow. I also love the cushioning on the armrest because I don't know if you do this, but I manage to bang my elbows on things constantly. And actually I have an elbow injury from doing that, painting this trim. So this has been nice. This is really nice to have this here. I love that it kind of reclines back a little bit. Has a full spin. It's adjustable on the side here. Ooh, what? Do you want to get up here? Okay, come here. A big thank you to FlexiSpot for sponsoring today's video and being such a great company to work with. You can check the link in my description below this video for more information on FlexiSpot's products. Okay, back to the video. I'll be using a 1x4 for most of the framing on the windows and doors, and then I have some 1x2 pieces that I'm gonna use as like an accent trim on the top and the bottom of all of the frames. I'm also using the color Palace White. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I'll put it up here on the screen for all of the trim at the moment. I've kind of been toying with doing the trim different colors. At one point I was even thinking I might do a stained trim, but after thinking on it for a little while, I decided that it was gonna be not only easier to go with the painted trim, but I actually really like the look of the painted trim better. So this week we put in a big order for trim for the entire upper level, and that arrived yesterday. And then yesterday afternoon, I painted the trim. I had already kind of experimented with using a paint sprayer when I did this window trim in the kitchen, and it was a little bit of a learning curve. So when I did my little paint test a few weeks ago, I found that it was a little bit easier to get an even coat if I watered down the paint a little bit. So I'm gonna do that again. It just helps everything kind of level out a little bit better. So I think I'm gonna do maybe 20 to 25% water in this mixture just to make it a little bit more self-leveling. It'll also make the paint go a little farther. Probably not quite 20%, it's probably more like 10%. Okay, I'm already making a mess. So you can see some areas are a little more textured than others. This is just a raw piece of wood. It has not been primed or anything, but like over here, it's already starting to kind of level out a little bit, so I guess I should just go for it. All right, I'm just gonna do it, baby. We chose primed pine boards for all of our trim pieces, and we wanted them to be primed. That's why they're already white, so that it would be a little easier to paint them and get a nicer finish, and we could kind of save ourselves that step. And at first I was a little unsure about the finish on this because when I first sprayed this on, it did have a kind of stippled orange peel texture to it. Don't know. But it did level out. I was also a little heavy-handed for this first batch. And over time I learned to be a little bit more efficient with my paint use, and it did level out a lot, so I didn't have to go as heavy-handed with it. So once I learned a little bit more about how this paint sprayer worked, I was able to just kind of trust the process and go with it. And since we were concerned about some gloomy weather that was approaching, I just did enough pieces to start on the dining room at this point, so we will be kind of doing this in phases, but hopefully we'll get some nice pretty days so that I can paint outside again and get this trim painted. The paint sprayer really does make it go more quickly. Okay. Got a couple more pieces to go. It's definitely a little bit messy. I mean, paint gets everywhere, and I do feel like I probably used more paint than I would if I was putting it on with a brush, but the trade-off is that it goes a lot faster. Then yesterday afternoon, after we let the paint dry for a little while, we brought it inside so that it could dry overnight and not be out in the elements and possibly get rained on or get dew on it or whatever. So as you can see behind me, there's a lot of trim on the floor. We've been just letting this dry. The trim is dry now, so I can start cutting pieces to fit in the space. For the base trim, I'm gonna be using 1x6s because I want just a chunkier base trim in this house. I think it's just gonna look really nice. Having that thicker trim for me is just a way to elevate the space a little bit. It looks a little bit more intentional, and anyway, I think it's gonna look really nice. Another thing that I've been doing throughout the house as we move through each space is using some expanding foam insulation spray stuff to fill gaps around the windows. And I did purchase the kind that is specifically for doors and windows so that it doesn't bow the frames of the doors and windows. So I've just been using that to kind of fill any gaps and, prevent any potential pests from getting in the house. And I've also done it around the exterior perimeter walls at the floor where the floor meets the wall in any areas that I thought kind of like they had big gaps. So hopefully we're kind of fortifying our house against pests as much as possible. But we do live out in the country, so you know, it is a little bit more of a concern here than it was when we lived in a more urban area. So I think I can stop rambling about this and get started on this trim. And this paint really levels out a lot. When I was spraying this on, it kind of had an orange peel texture, which was kind of concerning. And I found myself probably spraying on too much paint, but I eventually figured out I could, you know, put a little bit less paint on there and it would level out. So now it's actually quite smooth and looks pretty good. 54 3/4, 54 5/8. Okay, 33 1/4. 57 1/8. We got a new nail gun. The one that we had to be hooked up to an air compressor and it jammed constantly. So we invested in one that is cordless and we're gonna see how it works. So for the pieces that are gonna go on the side, I'm just aligning them with the top and the bottom edge of basically where the sill and the header is gonna sit. Might be a little tricky. Looks great. You wanna hold it there for me? Or I can hold it and you can nail. Nice! I like that. That's fun. In some places, the drywall comes out further than the window. Like on that one, it was fine. On this one, I was gonna see if I could kind of compress it down a little bit. Because some of it I can cover with caulk. Like that right there, I can get caulk in there. But see how it comes out over here? I was gonna try first to just like really press it in when I nail it. I don't know, what do you think? But I think again, I can put some caulk over here too.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, I just have to make it purty. Yeah, I can caulk that. Okay. This trim is just slick. It's my only beef right now with it. Oh, did that too close. Okay, crap. I put that right through the thing. All right, let's be a little bit more better here. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, there's a little bit of a gap back here, but I mean, nobody's ever gonna look right here, you know? Now I'll just measure across the width, including the two side frame pieces, to get the measurement for the top pieces. So this one's gonna be, I'm gonna do 51 5/8. And I'll cut 2 1x4s and 2 1x2s. So I'll have a 1x2 and a 1x4 on top, a 1x2 and a 1x4 on the bottom. What did I say that was? That is, yeah, 51 5/8. Measure top and the bottom. Okay. Oops. Yeah, that should do it. Okay, 51 5/8. A little bit more. So when we were ordering our trim, there weren't options to order 1x2s in the 12 or 16 foot lengths. And I didn't want to order the 8 foot lengths because all of our windows are like just over 4 feet wide for those top and bottom trim pieces. And I knew that if I ordered those 1x2s, which are only going on the top and the bottoms of the windows, and I would cut that, you know, a little bit more than 4 foot length off of the 8 foot piece, I would have an unusable length that was almost 4 feet, but I didn't have a use for it because the windows are pretty standard sizes throughout the house. So I ended up buying some extra 1x4s, and I'm just gonna rip those down to the size that I need for the 1x2. So I'm gonna use a scrap 1x2 here to set the width of my fence on my table saw, and I'm just gonna rip down some pieces to the 1x2 width that I can use on the trim. And I'm just gonna test it out on a scrap piece of 1x4. Perfect. When I run the other side through, I'm going to flip it over so that I am keeping that finished edge on the outside, basically. That was my longest piece. I always do the hardest parts first. Get those out of the way. Now my other two pieces are kind of short. So now to install the rest of this trim, I'm going to first put a 1x2. I'll do this on both the top and the bottom, but I'll do 1x2 and then the 1x4 right underneath it. Do the same thing on the top, 1x2 and then 1x4 on top. And to secure the 1x2s in place, I can't really nail through the front of this and nail it into here. I don't think my nails are long enough, and it's just kind of awkward to do it that way. What's easier is if you can just hold this in place, and then I'll put the 1x4 underneath it, secure the 1x4, and then I nail down into the, you know. I gave myself like about 1/8 of an inch extra just to make sure that it extends just barely past the edge of the side frame pieces. Then we'll put the 1x4 under that and line that up with the 1x2. Is it flush? Oh yeah, that's good. I'll nail in the 1x4. Now I'm also kind of pushing up the 1x4 into the 1x2 to make sure that it's as tight to this side frame piece. And then I'll nail down from the top. I'm doing a nail down into the framing piece below it. Another nice thing about this 1x2 is that it makes it look a lot cleaner how things go together, because if I was just putting this 1x4 right up against here, it may not be quite even. So this 1x2 trim kind of hides a lot of flaws in the trimming and in the unevenness of the wall. And actually on the top, it's a little easier because I can actually go ahead and put a nail down into the top of this framing so that it'll stay in place. I'll go ahead and put a couple in the bottom here into the framing. I'm also kind of angling back when I do that because I don't want the nails to come through the front of the framing. Kind of learned that the hard way. All right, let's do the other windows now. Now that we have all of the window trim up, I'm gonna start working on getting these base trim pieces here in the dining room. These are going to be pretty straightforward. I'm just going to do mitered corners at all the corners except for where the trim butts into the door trim. I feel like this should go pretty fast. So I'm going to try to get that done in the next 40 minutes because we want to go to the hardware store later today to get a few more supplies. It's my first time making a miter cut on this saw. I'm a little nervous. Nice. Okay, did it. We did it. Now we gotta go see if it fits. Ooh. I could probably trim off just a little bit. Just a hair. Come on. Oh, shit. Still need to trim a little bit off of it, I think. All right, third time's a charm, maybe? Oh, I think I need to go a little bit more. All right. Yeah, I need to do a little bit more. Damn it. But I know now, because when I was measuring, I kind of went a little bit on the long side of what the measurement was, so. Okay, yeah, I think that works better. All right, I guess I'm gonna start nailing it in. Wow, it's looking good though, damn. Thank you. All right, please fit. Oh, it's a little tight. Oh, maybe not, maybe not, maybe not. Oh, we're in. You're in like Flynn. So we don't really know where all the studs are, but usually the outlets are attached to a stud. So for these outlets, if I can't, like this one I can tell it's kind of shifted over to the left side, so it's probably attached to the stud on the left. So I'll put a nail in there, but if I can't tell, I'll put a nail on either side of these outlets because there's probably a stud there. That's a workout, damn. All right, it is the next day, and I spent this morning painting more trim boards for the living room area, and then I put in this last piece of trim over here. Yesterday afternoon, we decided to go to the hardware store. I needed to get some more paint for the trim because that sprayer uses a lot of paint. And then I also wanted to look at their plinth boards, that's really hard to say, plinth boards, because I want to do like a little plinth transition at the bottom of all of the doorways where the trim meets the door. I didn't like the ones that they had, so I just bought a like 5/4 by, 6 board that I can kind of chop down and rip down to a 4" by 6" size that's gonna basically be a 1/2 inch bigger than the trim in both places where they kind of meet at the corner and all of that. So I did cut the trim over here 4 inches shy of the edge of the door so that I can fit that plinth board in there once it dries. I went ahead and painted it this morning. But already this is looking so much better in here, and I am just kind of floored by how much better it looks, honestly. I mean, for the longest time, I'm looking in the living room right now and I can still see all of that kind of multicolored strip along the bottom of all the walls, and then the kind of messy guts of the window frames that are exposed right now. Just having all of that covered in here makes such a huge difference. It feels like a different house than the one that we initially moved into. So it's a really good feeling. And then I'm also gonna have to go through and fill all the little nail holes and gaps with the, what's it called? Spackle. I have to do some spackle on those. And then I am gonna go through and caulk all of the seams of the windows and the trim and everything, because I am gonna be painting all of this white, the same color as the trim. So in the windows here where it's the stained wood, that's gonna be painted to match the trim. I think that's just gonna look really nice and really freshen it up in here a lot. So I will caulk and do all of that before I do any kind of touch-ups and finish painting the rest of the trim and the rest of the windows. But I may actually take a break from doing this trim for now because I have some other things I need to work on, other projects for other videos. So anyway, we got to a really good point with this room so far, and it's just so nice to see how it's coming together. We're at the point now where every little thing we do makes the house feel better and makes it feel more ours, you know? So it's been a really good feeling to see all that come together. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Putting up trim is not necessarily hard, but it is, you know, it's a workout. So anyway, I'm gonna move on, do some other things today, but I will be back to put the rest of the trim in the rest of the house over the next few days. The next room will be the living room. I've got that out there drying right now. And I'll just continue working my way through each room in the house the same way we did for this room, measuring the trim, putting up the pieces, nailing everything in. It's gonna be a little bit of a process, but it'll basically go exactly the same as this that we've done so far.